your take on 205 Live and through the cruiserweight division and what kind of happened there?
So it's kind of twofold. For one, the cruiserweight division obviously gave smaller guys like me an opportunity to work in the WWE. My entire life, I always said, I'm going to be in the WWE. I'm going to wrestle there. I know I will. But in the back of my head, you go, you're also 5'10", an
Yeah.
average WWE wrestler. The guys I always looked up to were these giant hosses of men. So I always wondered, I said,
well, it just seems that way when you have someone standing so
yeah,
far back.
angle up a little bit.
It can really work out that way.
But so there was always, that was the only thing that I was like, that might be the only roadblock I have. They say, hey, you're a great wrestler, good look, all that kind of stuff, but you just don't fit the size bill.
Sure.
So when they came up with this Cruiserweight Classic and they said, hey, we're going to give another run at the Cruiserweight division, I was very grateful for that. And obviously all the guys who are in it are kind of guys who are in the same position I was. We're all talented wrestlers. We've all been grinding away for 10 years. We all had tryouts and looks and all that kind of stuff. And I think we all knew deep down, like, man, the only thing that's going to hold me back is if they're not into my size.
Right.
So
what a kick in the dick that is.
I know, right?
Like, there's nothing you can do. So thank God we get the cruiserweight division back.
That was really cool. Now, on the other side of the token, I just know in the history of how WWE does things, once you have that like cruiserweight stamp on you, it might be really like swimming upstream the entire time, because at the end of the day, it's still Vince McMahon's show. He still likes big, giant dudes and stuff like that. So that sounds funny to say, but
he likes the man likes what he likes.
He likes big, giant dudes. And so that was the only thing. I was happy that it created an opportunity for me to finally wrestle in WWE, but I also knew, I said, I didn't want to be labeled a cruiserweight. When I was an independent wrestler for 10 years, I was never a cruiserweight. I was never a lightweight, because independent wrestling, it's all shapes and sizes. It doesn't matter. So,
but even WWE in general still is that. I mean, you look at somebody like a Daniel Bryan to AJ Styles to some of these guys that might not have necessarily also fit that same build, but here they are main eventing, WrestleManias and pay-per-views and all that.
And that, I think that really helped. I like to give credit to guys like Daniel Bryan, CM Punk, and honestly, even Conor McGregor. Conor McGregor is a guy who he is a smaller guy in like the combat world of sports. And I think back in the day, it was always looked at like heavyweights were the draws, the Mike Tysons of the world. Someone like Conor McGregor showed that you can be a smaller guy and still be like a legitimate athlete. You can still be a badass and people still want to pay to see you. So I think he helped with that. Daniel Bryan helped with that. AJ Styles helped with that. So I think that finally pushed WWE to say, like, look, you need to look beyond people's size and just look at their raw skill and their talent. And if they can bring something,
you can be a star within that company.
If you can bring good wrestling to the table, and thankfully wrestling fans, especially today, they appreciate good wrestling. So I think they'll look past the fact. And honestly, if you're a big jacked up dude who can't wrestle, like, that's a bad thing.
That's terrible. There's no getting past that.
That's a prejudice that some fans might have. They say like, just another one of these guys. So there was a while where the smaller, I feel like from 2014 up until 2020, I should throw the Young Bucks in there too. They were obviously guys who I think the WWE always looked at them like, what's their deal? They're smaller guys, but then they went off and killed and became the most popular tag team in the world. So a lot of these guys kind of paved the way for this cruiserweight division to finally be taken a little bit seriously. And like I said, like 205, I mean, it's still running right now. I don't know exactly what's going on with it, but the show had a pretty solid 5-year run, which I think in the WWE, that's not bad for cruiserweights.
Not bad. It's not bad. No, it's not bad to look at all. But it's like, I think that you look at sort of what you assume and what we know that WWE wants, what Vince McMahon wants, versus what fans want now, because fans do want to see all of these different styles of wrestling. And that's why, I mean, you rattled off all these other promotions, whether they're on TV or they've got like a YouTube presence or whatever they might be doing, and they're all thriving and doing really well, because nobody just wants that cookie cutter mold of just this giant jacked dude.
Right.
It's having all these different platforms for people to jump to. So I mean, it just seems like such a cool time to really dip your toes into this water and like be back in control of your own career.
100%. And the other thing too is that like, it always kind of bothered me that WWE looked at this size thing when in reality, like being a WWE wrestler, like I'm sure John told you and you being there yourself, it's a very hard job. If you're not dedicated to professional wrestling, if you haven't dedicated your life to the craft of professional wrestling, I don't think it's going to work out for you. So a lot of the guys who are on 205, me, Ali, Gulak, Lindsay, Tony, like we're all very dedicated to pro wrestling. We love pro wrestling. We took it extremely seriously when we were on the independent scene. So it was always kind of weird to me that I was like, WWE should want that. You should want guys who say like, I'm here for this business. I'm here to die for the business. Like all that kind of shit. Like W should be like, hell yeah. Like these are the guys we want on our team who want to grind it out, who want to travel 300 days a year and stuff like that.
But house shows and like
but sometimes they'll use your love and passion for pro wrestling against you a little bit. So it was always kind of weird to me that I said, you should want like a roster full of guys who just absolutely love professional wrestling and they care about it and they took it upon themselves to learn the road and all that kind of stuff before they got to WWE. So it was just kind of weird to me that sometimes those guys like we don't want to go with this guy. We'll go with this football player who like this was his second choice, like football was his first love, wrestling's his backup choice.
What do you think that kind of stems from? There is a lot of that feeling, or even like the people that sort of seem like they don't really necessarily want to be there all the time and they don't want to do that grind. What is that thing that just is it like wanting to date the girl that doesn't really want to date you?
maybe I don't know. And like the funny thing is my brother always told me, he goes, the day you stop giving because the day they're gonna like push you. But I said I can never not give a like I care about this so much. Like I can't just be like, nah, whatever. I'll just phone it into my match tonight. Right. Like I couldn't do that. I don't have like the confidence to go out there and have a shitty match and be like, whatever. Like no, I have to like you're only as good as your last match, so I have to like wrestle my ass off every time. So I don't know where that comes from, but on the flip side too, look, there's been tons of guys who've come from other sports. Look at The Rock. The Rock was a football player. He said it before. He was trying to make it to the NFL. It didn't work out. And then he went to pro wrestling, but
he at least has the family lineage.
Yeah, he has the family lineage and he actually really, really loved it. But when I did my tryout a few times when I was at the PC, like I remember at my tryout, I met this like bodybuilder guy. So I was like, oh, like, what's your story and this and that. He's like, they emailed me to come here. I blew it off. And then they emailed me again and I blew it off. Then they called me. So like, here I am. Like, what about you? I'm like, well, I've been wrestling for like 8 years, dying to be here. But I don't know. It's weird. Like I said, I think but that's the nice thing about all these other companies that I listed. I think they're the ones who say, no, we want the guys who are on board with professional wrestling. And I've been saying this in every interview. I said AEW is a company. I said, they're doing pro wrestling right. Like, I love pro wrestling. I know, like when I was in WWE, like don't say pro wrestling. I'm like, this is pro wrestling. You're sports entertainer, superstar. I go, what we do is pro wrestling. What the fans want is pro wrestling. So sometimes when you give them like this, like sports entertainment bullshit, like they're not going to be into it. They want to see pro wrestling. That's what we all love. So
and I think as people become more educated on pro wrestling as well, and can you guys hear my baby crying? You guys are picking up on that? That's what we do when we're working at home. Sometimes the baby's crying, my mom's on it. It's fine. Yeah. She's okay, I assure you.
She'll be on the show eventually, right?
Yeah, she'll be fine. But I think as people kind of become more educated on what pro wrestling is and looks like too, they want more of that. They like to be on the inside too. They don't want to be fed like, here's the guy you're supposed to love, and there's always that revolt and pushback. It's just it's a tricky game. It can be a little treacherous.
And that's the one thing is that I feel like a lot of these other companies, I've heard other people say this, and I say, that's true. They don't insult the fans' intelligence. Sometimes I feel like WWE does that a little bit where they just try to feed them some bullshit. And if you're a lifelong wrestling fan, you kind of like see through that right away, give them pro wrestling. That's what they want. Like I get WWE's like this global entertainment company, but like you're still a wrestling company. Like your bread and butter is pro wrestling. So and that's what your fans want. So other companies, I think, just do a better job of listening to what the fans want, and then they give them pro wrestling.